Let's talk about the fall. Not the dramatic cinematic tumble from a great height, but the slow, intoxicating descent that feels like flying. It's a story most men live, but few ever narrate. You've been there, standing in the gravitational field of a woman, her attention, her body, her energy. It's a force of nature, an overwhelming magnetic pull that scrambles your thoughts and rewires your priorities. It's addictive, a current so powerful that as it sweeps you away, you swear on your life that its name is love. For Leo, that force had a name: Ava. He met her on a Tuesday, a day usually reserved for the mundane, but her presence turned the stale air of the crowded gallery into something electric. She wasn't just beautiful. She possessed a kind of ambient power, an aura that made everyone else in the room seem like a faded photograph. Her laughter was a melody that cut through the drone of chatter, and when her eyes met his, it felt less like a glance and more like a designation. He was chosen. For the next hour, he orbited her, a willing satellite caught in her celestial pull. He listened, rapt as she spoke about art she didn't create and books she hadn't finished, but the content was irrelevant. The true currency was her attention, and he was spending everything he had to acquire it. What if I told you that this experience, this heady rush Leo called a connection, wasn't love at all? It was strategy. It was a psychological dance, a biological trap so perfectly disguised as pleasure that most men walk into it willingly, smiling, convinced they've found the one. By the time you realize the beautiful garden is a cage, the gate has already clicked shut behind you, and you're in chains forged from your own desire. This isn't a sermon born of bitterness or a diatribe against women. It's an unmasking. It's about exposing the unconscious weapon that modern women wield, often without even understanding the sheer devastating power of it, their sexuality, the vagina trap, a primal agenda, coded into our very biology that operates behind the soft veil of romance and the intoxicating allure of desire. If you don't learn to see its architecture, to understand its mechanics, you will spend your life confusing your own destruction for destiny. Leo secured her number that night, a victory that felt more significant than the promotion he'd worked a year to achieve. The ensuing days were a blur of digital courtship. His phone became a sacred object, a portal to Eva. He'd craft texts with the precision of a poet, agonizing over emoji choice and response times. His focus, once laser-sharp, on his career and his gym routine began to diffuse. His world, once a kingdom of his own making, started to shrink, its new borders defined by the tantalizing possibility of her next message. The truth is brutally simple. A woman's sexual energy is her ultimate leverage. From the evolutionary instincts that whisper in her subconscious to the cultural narratives that scream from every screen, she has been taught, directly or indirectly, that her body holds the keys to a specific kind of power. And you, as a man, you've been trained by those same forces to chase it, to validate it, to build your worth around attaining it, to die for it. Wars have been fought, empires have crumbled, and great men have been brought to their knees for this very energy. But in today's world, the weapons aren't swords and shields. They're DMs and dating apps. They're curated images, calculated vulnerability, and validation disguised as courtship. A woman no longer needs to seduce a man with the depth of her character or the brilliance of her mind. She simply has to exist, presented through a few flattering filters and the right outfit, and a legion of men will line up to offer their time, their energy, their focus, their very souls. That's the trap. Not the physical act of sex, but what it represents. The moment you surrender your mind, your self-worth, and your life's purpose just because a woman bestows her physical attention upon you, you cease to be a man steering his own ship. You become a puppet, dancing on strings you can't even see. A week later, Leo sat across from his uncle, Marcus, a man who seemed carved from a different era. Marcus was a retired architect, but his true craft was the construction of a formidable life. His presence was quiet, grounded, like an old oak tree that had weathered 1,000 storms. He watched his nephew, noticing the nervous tap of his fingers and the way his eyes darted to his phone every 30 seconds. "She's got you, doesn't she?" Marcus said, his voice calm, without judgment. "What are you talking about?" Leo replied, a little too quickly. "The fever," Marcus clarified, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "The one that makes a man forget his own name. You think it's about her, the person. It's not. You're caught in the mechanism, the great engine of hypergamy." He let the word hang in the air. "Understand this, Leo. She wants the best man she can possibly get. Not necessarily the kindest, not the most loyal, not even the most handsome. She is subconsciously, relentlessly seeking the man with the most perceived value in the current marketplace. And if you don't know your own worth, she will use your desire against you as a diagnostic tool." Leo thought of the hoops he'd already jumped through, the last-minute dinner plans that had him canceling a session with his trainer, the expensive concert tickets he'd bought to impress her, even though he disliked the artist. She was extracting his time, his energy, his resources, all while keeping the ultimate prize, physical intimacy, as a dangling carrot. The closer he felt he was getting, the more tests she seemed to create. And for everyone he passed, every hoop he leaped through, he felt a flicker of pride, not realizing that with each jump, her respect for him diminished. Deep down, a woman doesn't want the man who is willing to beg, supplicate, and perform for her affection. She wants the man who doesn't need her, whose life is so compelling that she feels fortunate to be a part of it. But here's the most sinister part of the trap. Her body will keep you close even while her mind is already planning your exit. You think she's loyal because she's intimate with you, because she whispers sweet things in the dark. But her hypergamous instinct is always on, a silent radar scanning the horizon for a better option, a potential upgrade. 2 weeks later, Leo got what he wanted. After a perfect date he'd orchestrated and financed, he and Eva ended up at his apartment. The experience was everything he had built it up to be: intense, consuming, a validation of his entire chase. He fell asleep feeling like a conqueror. But when he woke up, the air had changed. The shift was subtle at first. Before sex, she had been sweet, attentive, almost submissive in her admiration. She laughed at all his jokes, praised his ambitions, and made him feel like the center of the universe. Now, in the morning light, that warmth had been replaced by a cool, placid distance. The power dynamic had irrevocably changed. He had given her what she, on a primal level, was seeking: his complete emotional and physical investment, his energy, his focus, the thrill of his chase. Now that he was fully invested, she held all the cards. She had become the prize, and he had become the addict, already worrying about his next fix. This was the vagina trap in real time. It tricks you into believing the reward is her, when in reality, the reward was always supposed to be you, your purpose, your strength, your kingdom. What makes this process so lethally effective is its invisibility. Most men don't realize they've been caught until they find themselves emotionally exhausted, financially strained, and spiritually drained. They don't see the bars of the cage appearing when they start canceling plans with their friends to be on her beck and call. They don't notice the chains when they stop working on their business, when their gym visits become sporadic, when their entire mood for the day hinges on whether or not she texts back. Slowly, piece by piece, she becomes the center of their universe, and they call it love. But love is not obsession. Love is not dependency. Love is not the erosion of self. What Leo was beginning to experience was psychological submission to a biological spell, and unless he could find a way to snap out of it, she would keep weaving it with soft words, alluring looks, and calculated touches until his masculine core was completely hollowed out. The weeks that followed were a slow, agonizing education in the principles Marcus had tried to explain. Leo found himself trapped in a cycle of intermittent reinforcement. Eva would pull away, becoming distant and unresponsive for days, leaving him in a state of anxious confusion. He'd replay every conversation, dissect every interaction, wondering what he'd done wrong. His work suffered. His thoughts were a constant, looping obsession with her. Then, just as he reached a breaking point, she would reappear with a flirty text, a seductive photo, or a last-minute invitation. The relief was so overwhelming, the dopamine hit so intense that it erased all the preceding pain. He was a lab rat pressing a button, desperately hoping for another pellet of pleasure. This, his uncle had warned him, is how men become slaves. This cycle works so effectively for one reason. Most men are operating with a profound void inside them, a lack of self-approval, a desperate, gnawing craving for external validation, especially from a beautiful woman. A woman knows this intuitively. She doesn't need a degree in psychology to understand that a man who places her on a pedestal is a man who can be controlled. So she amplifies the bait. She plays the role of the perfect girl, the sweet angel, the sexual goddess, and just when you're hooked, convinced you've found heaven, she withdraws. She creates distance, confusion, and pain. Now you're no longer just chasing the woman. You're chasing the feeling she initially gave you. You're chasing the validation that only she seems capable of providing. The real agenda here isn't conscious malice. Most women aren't sitting in a dark room plotting your demise. It's deeper, more instinctual. It's generational programming, an algorithm embedded into their DNA by centuries of survival-based mating. They select for strength, not just physical, but emotional and spiritual. They select for stability, not your lofty dreams, for dominance, not your eager compliance. When they sense weakness, especially emotional weakness, that needy, pleading energy, their desire evaporates. It's a brutal, biological kill switch. The man who confuses performative emotional availability with genuine attractiveness is the man who gets used for his resources and then discarded after he has served his purpose. She might say she wants your vulnerability, but what she truly craves is the feeling of safety that comes from your emotional security. She wants your stillness in the storm, not your breakdowns. The breaking point for Leo came on a Friday night. He had meticulously planned a weekend trip for them, a romantic getaway to the coast. He'd told his friends he was unavailable, turned down an important networking event, and poured his energy into making it perfect. An hour before they were supposed to leave, she canceled with a casual text. "Hey, so sorry. Something came up with my friend. She really needs me. Rain check?" "Sure." He stared at the screen, a cold dread washing over him. It wasn't the cancellation itself, but the chilling indifference of it. In that moment, the illusion shattered. He saw the pattern, the complete lack of respect for his time, his effort, his investment. He was not her partner, he was an option, a convenient source of entertainment and validation that could be dismissed at a moment's notice. He picked up the phone and called Marcus. "You cannot break out of the trap." Marcus's voice was steady, a lighthouse in Leo's storm. "Until you stop needing her approval. That is the first and final step. You must stop chasing and start building. You shift your entire life's focus from "how do I get her" to "how do I become undeniable." That night, Leo made a decision. He didn't text Eva back with anger or pleading. He simply deleted her number. The act felt like an amputation, painful but necessary. The next morning, he went to the gym, not as a chore, but as an act of devotion to himself. He stayed late, at the office, not out of obligation, but because he rediscovered the thrill of his own ambition. He began to build a mission so powerful, a life so compelling, that a woman, even one as captivating as Eva, would feel lucky to be a small part of it. That is when the game changes. That is when you flip the script. You are no longer being lured. You are being chosen, but on your terms. Most women have never encountered a man who looks at them not with lust or neediness, but with clarity, with a calm, masculine detachment, with a piercing gaze that says, I see you. I see the beautiful performance, the carefully constructed persona. Now, show me your soul. That is the moment the illusion breaks and the mask falls. When you are not distracted by her curves or hypnotized by her smile. You are present, grounded, and unshakable. Suddenly, she doesn't feel in control anymore. She feels seen, and to a woman who relies on her performance for power, being truly seen is terrifying, because now she has to be real. As weeks turned into months, Leo's transformation was profound. He stopped giving away free validation. He didn't compliment women just because they looked good. He saved his praise for character, for integrity. He didn't flood anyone's DMs. He didn't jump when a woman called. He remained centered, making them earn his time and attention, not because he was playing games, but because he had finally learned to value his own energy. And a strange thing happened. The less he sought their approval, the more they sought his. That is the great paradox. Her desire activates not because you chased, but because you didn't. The guys who don't chase, who are slightly aloof, mysterious, even unavailable. Their magnetic pull isn't a coincidence, it's a biological trigger. Women are drawn to emotional tension, to the unknown, to the man whose validation is scarce and therefore valuable. When you pull away, not as a tactic but as a genuine way of life because you are busy with your own purpose, you activate a deeper part of her psychology, the part that wants to earn you. The trap only works on men who are begging to be chosen. When you choose yourself, when you radiate purpose, when your energy is no longer seeking but attracting, you become the prize she can't stop thinking about. Masculine energy doesn't chase. It attracts. It doesn't convince. It commands. The more grounded you become in your own life, the more magnetic your presence becomes. You walk into a room, and people feel it. Women feel it. Their usual games, the breadcrumbing, the seduction, the passive aggression, hit a wall. Their tests fail because you don't react. You don't over-explain. You don't pursue. You don't flinch when they withhold affection. You simply observe, calmly, confidently, with a quiet strength that terrifies the unworthy. In that moment, you become dangerous, not to women, but to the system that raised them to believe they could trap a powerful man with sexuality alone. Never confuse sex for power. Just because she gives you her body does not mean she gives you her respect. The real questions are these. Does she admire you? Does she trust your leadership? Does she feel safer in your silence than in another man's endless compliments? If not, you're not winning. You're just accepting crumbs, mistaking them for a feast, and falling deeper into the illusion that being sexually desired is the same as being emotionally respected. The antidote, the spellbreaker, is intentional. Masculine detachment. You train your nervous system not to react. You train your mind to stop seeking. You anchor yourself so firmly in your purpose that her presence becomes a wonderful bonus, not a desperate lifeline. When she senses that, when she feels that you don't need her attention, her body, or her validation to be a whole and fulfilled man, the entire dynamic flips. She starts chasing, not because you played her, but because you finally stopped playing yourself. Leo's final lesson came 6 months later. He ran into Eva at a cafe. She looked just as beautiful, but he felt nothing of the old, desperate pull. He was calm, centered, smiling. They spoke for a few minutes, and he was polite but detached. He didn't ask for her number. He didn't try to prolong the conversation. He had a meeting to get to. He had a life to live. As he walked away, he could feel her eyes on him, a look of confusion and newfound intrigue on her face. The power was his now, not because he had taken it from her, but because he had reclaimed it from within himself. Remember this. The trap only works on the man who hasn't learned to govern himself, but the man who has mastered detachment, who walks with purpose, who doesn't need a woman to feel whole. He is the one she can't control. He is the one who sees the agenda and stays still. He's the one who smiles, not because he's been seduced, but because he is sovereign. And that man is who you become, one step, one breath, one truth at a time.